Symphony of Darkness. The auditorium stood silent, its high ceilings echoing with the whispers of wind through cracked windows. Dust floated lazily in the beams of dim light, settling on sheet music that lay scattered across the empty chairs. The orchestra had been rehearsing for weeks, their once harmonious melodies now laced with discord. Tension simmered among the musicians. Something was wrong. It started with the violinist. She had played the first notes of her solo when her bow froze mid-stroke. Her eyes widened in shock, and before anyone could react, she crumpled and ran off stage. The others rushed to find her, but no sign. It was as if she had disappeared into thin air. The violin lay sprawled on the stage floor, humming an unfinished note. The conductor dismissed it as stress. "She'll return," he said, his voice calm but cold. The orchestra continued, though unease gripped the players. As the days passed, more vanished. The cellist was next, then the flutist. Each time it happened, the music felt heavier, darker. The conductor remained unfazed, urging the remaining musicians to play with more intensity. One evening, a young trombonist, trembling with fear, refused to play. "I'm not doing this anymore," he said, his voice shaking. "They're not coming back." The conductor's gaze hardened. Without a word, he raised his baton and the trombonist's body stiffened. His eyes rolled back, his mouth opened in a silent scream as he was swallowed by a dark void. The others watched in horror, but they could not move, paralyzed by the conductor's cold command. "We must finish," the conductor bellowed, his voice now hollow. "The symphony demands completion." The remaining players continued, though their fingers trembled on the strings, their breaths shallow in the cold air. Each note seemed to pull them deeper into something they could not escape. The conductor, his once warm eyes now dark and distant, moved with an unnatural grace, his baton slicing through the air like a blade. The night before the final performance, the pianist made a terrible discovery. She had stayed late, practicing alone. Now a prisoner, she hoped to shake the feeling of dread deep inside her. As she played the final chord, a low rumble echoed through the hall. The sound was not from her piano. It came from beneath the stage. Curiosity got the better of her, and she descended into the basement. The door creaked open, revealing a labyrinth of forgotten rooms and passages. In the center of the largest room stood an old, rusted organ. It was enormous, its pipes reaching up to the ceiling, covered in dust and cobwebs. But what caught her breath were the shadows gathered around it. Shadows of people, their faces contorted in pain, their hands gripping invisible instruments. As she watched, the shadows began to play. Silent music filled the air, twisting and swirling around her. She backed away in terror, but something stopped her. A voice, barely a whisper, drifted through the room. "Beware! Beware!" The pianist fled, her heart racing, but the shadowy figures haunted her thoughts. When she returned to the rehearsal the next day, the others could see the fear in her eyes. She tried to warn them, to tell them what she had seen, but the conductor silenced her with a single look. That evening the orchestra took their places for the final rehearsal. The pianist realized there were only 5 of them left. The hall was filled with an unnatural silence, thick and oppressive. The conductor raised his baton and the music began. Each note dragged the players deeper into their instruments, their bodies swaying as though controlled by something unseen. The room grew colder, the lights dimming until only the glow of their music stands remained. One by one, the musicians began to fade. The pianist felt her fingers growing numb, her vision blurring as she struggled to keep playing. Suddenly, the music stopped. The pianist looked up, her breath shallow. The conductor stood at the podium, his eyes fixed on her. "It is complete," he said, his voice barely a whisper. She blinked, her mind spinning. Then she saw it. The musicians were gone. Not vanished like before, but transformed. They stood before her, their bodies translucent, their faces blank. They held their instruments, but their movements were stiff, unnatural. Spectral figures, trapped in an eternal performance. The conductor turned, his once human form flickering like a dying flame. His features twisted, revealing the truth. He was no man, but a horrific ghost. A being bound to the music, cursed to complete a symphony that could never end. The musicians were his prisoners, and now she was one of them. The pianist tried to scream, but no sound came. Her body, cold and lifeless, moved of its own accord, lifting her hands back to the keys. The conductor raised his baton once more, and the cursed symphony resumed. In the empty hall, only the ghostly notes of the vanished orchestra echoed through the darkness. A reminder of the night when music turned to madness and life became an eternal concert of despair.